It is that time of year where I need to go through my physically read books from 2025 and decide if I am going to keep them or toss them. And of course, by toss, I don't mean I'm going to throw them away, but I'm not going to keep them on my shelves. I have 3 shelves that are my all-time read shelves. I keep books on there that I think I might reread, that I really, really loved, that have some special meaning for me, or are part of a collection that I love to collect, like vintage Agatha Christie and vintage Mary Robert Reinhardt books. I donate the other books that I don't want. I like to keep all my books throughout the year and put them on one shelf. It starts with just this shelf, and usually this shelf is reserved for my Cat Cozy Mysteries that I use as reference, my DNF books, which are currently up top that you can't see, and my TBR spin list for the year. But as the year goes on, I run out of room, so I needed to use that shelf as well. So we have 2 shelves, not including these books over here, that we are going to go through today. We're going to go through all the physical books that I have read throughout 2025 and decide whether we're going to keep or toss. These are in no particular order because when I put them back on my shelves after I have done my wrap up, I just put them in whatever order comes to mind. I think this is a hair up activity. Quicksand by Nella Larsen. This is the second Nella Larsen that I've read, and Nella Larsen was part of the Harlem Renaissance. Her most famous work is Passing, and I have read and reread that book and really, really loved and enjoyed it. Quicksand I thought was interesting. It is about a young woman coming of age and realizing how life works and how she wants it to work, and it is loosely based, I think, on Nella Larsen's actual life, and this will be staying on my shelf. Next we have, I didn't plan this at all, another book called Quicksand. This is by Junichiro Tanizaki, and this is translated from the Japanese by Howard Hibbett. This is an originally serialized dramatic novel about a woman and her affairs. I didn't love this book, but actually something at the very end made me want to go back and reread it, so I am going to keep this on my shelves for now. China in 10 Words by UNHAUL. This is a nonfiction book, and it is just what it says on the tins. It's the story of China and the story of the author in 10 words. He uses these 10 words to examine both his life and life in China, and this was really fascinating. I really enjoyed it, and I'm definitely going to keep it on my shelves. China in 10 Words was translated from the Chinese by Alan H. Barr. Another translated work is The Inugami Curse by Seishi Yokomizo. This is a classic Japanese murder mystery, and this is kind of in the middle of the series, but I really, really enjoyed this one. It is translated from the Japanese by Yomiko Yamazaki. Super happy to have this on my shelves. Will be keeping this one. Next we have a nonfiction. This is Soul on Ice by Eldridge Cleaver. This is a memoir of Eldridge Cleaver. It's a collection of essays and letters that he wrote while he was in prison, and this was a really fascinating read. I'm going to keep this one on my shelves for now because I could see myself referencing back to this when I read other works of American history. Another translated work, translated from the Japanese by Donald Keene, is No Longer Human by Osamu Dazai. This is a fairly quiet novel about a man's life who feels as if he is other than everyone else. So he feels like he is no longer human or never was human. And I really enjoyed this one, and I will definitely be keeping it. Next we have Lolly Willows. This is by Sylvia Townsend Warner, and this is a classic novel of a woman who is gaining her independence, and maybe she is doing that through meeting Satan. This was a weird but fun novel. I think this is another one that I will definitely be keeping because it's one that I could see revisiting, and I would like to read more of Sylvia Townsend Warner's work. I really love Shannon Maguire. I love the Wayward Children series, and I read Dusk or Dark or Dawn or Day, which is kind of a redemption ghost story of a young woman and her sister. And I did really enjoy this one, but I don't necessarily think I need to keep this one on my shelves. I think if I wanted to revisit this standalone speculative novel, I could do so on audio. Next we have The Good Life by Scott and Helen Nearing, 60 Years of Self-Sufficient Living, and this is actually 2 books. The first book I read several years ago, and then in 2025, in December, I read the second book. This is what it says on the tin, and I really love this book. It's very instructional, but it does contain some of their personality and their personal life in it, and it's one that I could definitely see revisiting and using as a manual and using as inspiration, but also just an enjoyable read. So I will definitely be keeping this one on my shelves. I read 4 Toni Morrisons this year, and Tar Baby was the last one that I read, and I really enjoyed this one. This one follows a young woman and her family who live and work, at least part-time, on an island for a rich white man. We'll be keeping all Toni Morrison, of course. Next, we have The Color Purple by Alice Walker. This is a classic lesbian novel about a young woman who has a very hard start in life and very hard middle part of life, and it's about her writing to her sister who she is estranged from against her will, and writing to God, and it is an epistolary novel, and I loved this novel very much. We'll be keeping this one. Next, we have Zen Mind, A Beginner's Mind, Informal Talks on Zen Meditation and Practice by Shunyo Suzuki. This is a collection of essays on Buddhism, on Zen Buddhism, and on different ways to lead a Buddhist lifestyle, and also just to lead a good lifestyle, to live your life. I read it this year on audio and I really enjoyed it. I will be keeping this one. This was edited by Trudy Dixon. I don't know if this was a translated work or not. I don't know if these speeches were originally translated. It doesn't say in the book, but we can maybe think that the editor had something to do with that as well. This is a tough one. This is Rental House by Waiki Wang. And actually, while we're talking about this one, let's talk about The Anthropologists by Asugul Saivas as well. I read both these books fairly recently, and I did enjoy them. I definitely enjoyed The Anthropologists more. They both have very similar stories and very similar themes about a couple who is getting on in years, and although they were super in love when they first got married, and although they decided not to have children and they enjoy the lifestyle they have, they're both wondering, both people in the couple and both people in both books are wondering if there is something that they're missing out on. In Rental House, they are going on vacation. We see one kind of early in their relationship, and then we see one later in their relationship, and going to a rental house. These are both mostly told from the woman in the relationship's perspective, and in Rental House, she's really changed her idea and thoughts on what kind of house she wants, what kind of life she wants to lead. So we see that come out in where they rent their house and what their rental house means to them and what happens in the rental house. I did enjoy the first part of this a lot more than the second part, which is why I'm hesitant to keep it. This is also a signed copy, which is pretty neat. But I actually really liked The Anthropologists. So this one follows a couple who are foreigners in the city that they live in, both foreigners, both from different places, and how they fit in and how it's hard for them because everyone in that city already knows each other or have commonalities of being from that place, and our main couple don't. So the woman of the main couple is really looking for a new apartment and trying to change their life by, thinking what that new apartment could do for them. Would they live closer to friends? Like, would they make new friends? Are there new cafes? Are there new places that they could go to? And I really just liked this one a lot more and enjoyed the reading process and enjoyed the writing a lot more. But I think these talk to each other really interestingly, especially because these are, in my mind, white characters living in a foreign place, and this is a mixed race couple living in America. I think there's some commentary that could be gleaned by reading these. So we're going to keep these for now. I would definitely keep The Anthropologists on my shelf for longer, but Rental House we'll keep for now, and we'll see if I ever read them again. Oh My Mother, which is by Connie Wang, and it is a memoir in 9 adventures. This is a memoir of Connie Wang and her relationship with her mother in 9 adventures that they have together, loosely told in that, and it is loosely about Connie wanting to explore her mother's life, because her mother has always played a story in Connie's life, but how does her mother's own self and personhood factor into that. These are obviously real stories and interesting people, but this wasn't my favorite of all memoirs, and I definitely don't need to keep it on my shelf. Next, we have The Appeal by Janice Hallett. It is a mixed media mystery. It's all told in emails and text and messages. It's British. It has all these aspects that I think I would really, really like, but I did not like this book at all. I just really thought that this was not well done. I thought the mystery wasn't interesting. I thought it was a little bit obvious. I thought that the characters were really unlikable, but not in an interesting way. So I am going to unhaul this one. Junji Ito's Cat Diary, Yawn and Moo. And this is a manga from the horror mangaist Junji Ito. This was translated from the Japanese, but I cannot figure out who it was translated by. This is a very sweet semi-autobiographical, semi-biographical story of Yawn and Moo, and I will definitely be keeping this one. Next we have The Last Time I Saw Amelia Earhart by Gabrielle Calvo Caresi. This is a collection of poetry that I read on a total whim while I was cat sitting over the summer, and I absolutely fell in love with. It deals with queer themes. It deals with kind of storytale, fairy tale themes. It deals with gender and sexuality, and I really, really loved it, and it will be going in my poetry collection. For the most part, I will probably keep basically all my poetry unless there was something that I really, really didn't like or really feel like doesn't fit in my collection, but this one it definitely is because I loved this book. Swimming Lessons by Claire Fuller is a book that has been on my TBR for a very long time, on my want to read before that, and I've had this one since before 2022, so I was super happy to get to it. It is about a man who is reading letters that his wife left him in books around the house. So his wife mysteriously disappeared, and he's finding letters from her that have been tucked inside books. Sounds amazingly right up my alley. I just don't know if I could ever see myself revisiting it. Like, I want to keep it just because it's an epistolary novel and because I enjoyed it, but like, will I ever read it again? So this is going to be our first maybe. The very first book that I read in 2025 was We Took to the Woods by Louise Dickinson Rich. And similar to The Good Life, this is a book about a family who moves to the Adirondack Mountains and lives a self-sustainable life, lives a life outside of society. That is one of my favorite types of nonfiction to read and something that really inspires me and encourages me to live up to my own ideals. I will definitely be keeping this. I will definitely be revisiting. You tell I tabbed the bottom quite a bit. I had a really good time with this one. Another work of poetry which didn't really land for me I read in December, and that was You Can Be the Last Leaf, which is selected poems by Maya Abu al-Hayat. And this was translated from the Arabic, I believe, by Fadi Joda. Maya Abu al-Hayat is a Palestinian author, and this was an interesting collection that spans like 10 or more years. So the first part is 2021, and then the last part contains poems from like 2006. I didn't really get this one. It didn't hold my attention. I didn't love it. It just didn't resonate with me. But that being said, I think it's the kind of thing that I should keep and maybe revisit at another time. Maybe read something else by this author so that I can then come back to this one. A collection of poetry that I definitely did connect with, which was a surprise to me, was Anyone by Nate Glugg. I picked this collection of poetry up totally randomly, and it has a lot to do with classical writing and ancient writing and translating that work, retelling those stories, which, you know, is not my thing. It also has to do with religion and spirituality, which is not my thing, but I really, really enjoyed this collection. I really like this cover as well, and I'm super excited to reread this one and super excited to read more by this author. We'll be keeping that one. A collection of poetry that I read earlier in this year was Father of Water by Charles Pierre. I liked this one. It had a lot of themes of water, of the shore, of the ocean, of connection with nature, and it takes place in places that I'm familiar with, like Long Island and other places closer to home, so I will definitely be keeping Father of Water. Let's go up here to some of these books. Oh, Another collection of poetry, which I thought was really interesting, is The Night We Stood Up for Our Rights. These are poems by Morty Sklar. So these are really interesting. They're poems that range from 1969 to 1975. I have never heard of this author before I started reading this, and I really liked this collection of poetry. It has a lot to do with Morty's time in the army and in the war, and then his PTSD coming out of that. It has to do with his upbringing in Queens and Brooklyn and New York. I'm surprised that I haven't heard more about this author, so I'm definitely keeping this and hope to find more of his work. The Window at the White Cat by Mary Roberts Reinhardt. I actually have a couple of copies of this book, so, oh, here's the other one. So I will be keeping both of these because I do, as I mentioned before, have a Mary Robert Reinhardt collection. All books by Agatha Christie, by Mary Robert Reinhardt, by P.D. James, I will be keeping and putting on my collection shelves, and I will be rereading, and I will be enjoying. This is a really weird edition of this that was obviously like reprinted after this book went into public domain or something. So interesting to have that one. And then this is a stunning copy that has a map on the back. As I mentioned, P.D. James, Time to Be in Earnest is a fragment of an autobiography, and this is a diary that she wrote for a year in her 77th year. It was written between 1997 and 1998, and I was super happy to have read this. I found it incredibly interesting and captivating and inspiring. Shore of You by Olmsted Maupin is the fifth in the Tales of the City series, and I love these books. They were originally serialized. They are about a group of found family and a collection of people who all met each other at one apartment building in San Francisco originally in the 70s, and as the people grow and as their stories grow, we grow with them. Definitely a book that I will be keeping, definitely a series I will continue to read, and one that I really love. Next we have The Foxwife by Yangsze Choo. Yangsze Choo is one of my favorite fantasy authors. I love her work. This is about a fox who can turn into a woman who is seeking revenge. We'll definitely be keeping this one on my shelves. The Sentence by Louise Erdrich. This is the second Louise Erdrich I've read, and I love her writing. The Sentence is about Tukey, who we see released from prison kind of early on in this book, and then it's all about her life. I will be keeping The Sentence on my shelves. The next book I have is The Ballad of Jaquat Delahaye by Bryony Cameron. This is a queer pirate book about a young woman who is an apprentice to a shipmaker. This is not a light, fun, happy book. I was hoping there would be more in the vein of Amina al-Sarafi and other books like that, but I did enjoy this one. There are a lot of heavy topics, there's a lot of violence, there's a lot of gore. I don't see myself rereading this, even though I really enjoyed it, and I don't necessarily need to keep it on my shelves, so I will be unhauling this one. House of Blues is part of the Skip Langdon series by Julie Smith. I love this series. It is all about Skip Langdon and her life as part of the New Orleans Police Department. I like that they have a little bit more to say than just your fluffy, no substance, cozy mystery, so I will be keeping all Julie Smith's books that we come across. Olga Dies Dreaming by Xochitl, I looked this up, Xochitl Gonzalez, is a debut novel about a young woman who grew up in Brooklyn. It's about her relationship with her mother, who is on the run and who has left her family, her relationship with her father, who had substance abuse issues, but in some ways tried to take the best care of her and her brother as he could, and her relationship with her brother. And mostly this is a love letter to New York and a love letter to Sunset Park in Brooklyn. So for that aspect, I really enjoyed it. I think this cover is really pretty, but I am going to be unhauling this book. Taproot, a story about a gardener and a ghost by Keene Young, is a young adult graphic novel. I really enjoyed this one. It's a love story. It has queer joy. It's really beautiful on the inside, so I will be keeping this graphic novel. It's exactly what it says on the tin, a story about a gardener and a ghost. I will be putting this on my graphic novel shelves. We Need to Do Something by Max Booth is a horror. It's a little ambiguous from the description what kind of horror it is, so I'm not going to mention it here. I did not like this book, and I will not be keeping it. How to Pronounce Knife by Suvankam Thamaganza is a collection of short stories. This was nominated for the Giller Prize. Thamaganza is a Laos and Canadian author, and some of these stories I really enjoyed. I know that Thamaganza has a long novel that is loosely based on one of these short stories out now. I'm super excited to get to that one. I did enjoy a lot of these stories, and I do want to keep this one on my shelves. Graveyard Shift by M.L. Rio is a short horror novella that almost everybody didn't like. It's about a collection of people who live on a college campus. I loved this book. I don't know why people didn't like it. I thought it was interesting. I thought it was atmospheric. The cover is disturbing but very beautiful, and I definitely will be keeping this one on my shelves. The Most by Jessica Anthony. Everybody said was a weird book, and I don't think it was that weird. The synopsis makes it sound a lot weirder than it actually is. It's a very short book, and I didn't love it at first, but the more I think about it, the more I would like to revisit it. It's another one of those books that kind of, when you figure out what's going on, it changes the way you thought about the rest of the book. So I'm gonna keep it for now. My Dog Tulip by J.R. Ackerley is a memoir about J.R. Ackerley's dog Tulip, and it has a lot to do with why he loves his dog, but it has more to do with dog sex. It is an NYRB book, which makes me want to keep it, but this one is definitely going to go in the maybe pile. Let's do some up here. I have 2 copies of The Bat by Mary Robert Reinhardt. I read this one on audio. This is one of Mary Robert Reinhardt's romantic suspense novels. I like this one. It's not one of my all-time favorites, but this did have a real 1930s, 1940s noir, almost radio play, lurking behind the shadows kind of bad guy vibe to it that I did really enjoy. And like I said, I'm going to keep all Mary Robert Reinhardt books. Next we have The Souls of Black Folk by W.E.B. Du Bois. This is a nonfiction collection of essays about Black life, and specifically about Black life after slavery was abolished and Black people became free men. It also talks about W.E.B. Du Bois's life. It's definitely a cornerstone of Black American nonfiction. I will be keeping it. I will be revisiting. A book that really surprised me was Ruby Fruit Jungle. I've put off this queer classic by Rita Mae Brown for so long. I shouldn't have. It was so great. I feel that way about The Color Purple as well. This was actually a year of reading queer work that I had been putting off and being surprised at how amazing it was. I should not be surprised that this book about a young woman who grows up in the South and then moves around the world, moves around the country to find herself, and in the process finds her queerness, should be bad, but I'm so conditioned and so accustomed to all queer stories being negative that I always am worried, I always am fearful of them. But this was a great queer classic. I'll definitely be keeping this one, adding it to my queer history, queer classic collection. I think it was last year that I started reading the Castle Perilous books by Dawn DeChancy. I started with Castle Perilous. These are all rereads for me. This year I read Castle for Rent. These all came out on audio just a few years ago, like 2023 or something. The audiobooks are really fun, so you can definitely pick this up without buying the books. I'm going to keep this book because this is my old copy from when I was a young adult, older teenager, young adult, and I have quite a few more on my shelves that I will also be reading through and keeping. At Bertram's Hotel is the 10th or 11th book, or 12th or 13th book in the Miss Marple series. I'm reading all of Miss Marple by Agatha Christie, and I absolutely love them. We'll be keeping all Agatha Christie. In 2025, I read my first Doris Miles Disney, which was Blackmail. I got this one totally randomly at a book sale, and I just got it because it sounded interesting, and it had to do with the USPS, and this book is about threatening letters that are being sent. A USPS detective has to come and investigate them. This is not a real mystery because we know who's writing the letters right off the bat, but it definitely works as a suspense, and I will definitely be keeping this for my collection. Great vintage cover too. Next we have Thank You Jeeves, which is part of the Jeeves and Wooster series by P.G. Wodehouse. I love P.G. Wodehouse. I love Jeeves and Wooster. They're hilarious. Wooster is a dandy and a rich, aristocratic young man living in the early 1900s in England. He goes to New York. He goes to different places, and along with him, always helping him, is Jeeves, his much smarter, much more serious, much more wily manservant. It is worth noting that this is one of the more racist books, having racial slurs in it. So just be warned when you read this one. Maybe start with some of the other ones, maybe skip this one. It was good, it was funny, but is it worth it? I'm not sure. I will be keeping it, and I will be keeping it on my shelves. Cane by Jean Toomer. I have another copy of this somewhere. I think it's buried though. This is another Black American classic told in little vignettes and little stories, and the common theme of all these stories is sugarcane. So mostly takes place in the South and talks about a lot of different people and their relationship to sugarcane. It is an American classic and definitely deserves space on my shelves. The Autobiography of a Sexually Emancipated Communist Woman is a very small autobiography, very small memoir that I found. This was translated. It is written by Alexandra Kollontai, but it does not have the translator's name. I'm going to keep this one on my shelves for now because I do think that this was one that I should revisit. Another book that I read super early in the year, way back in January of 2025, is Thousand Cranes by Yasunari Kawabata. I've read quite a bit of Kawabata's work, and I really enjoy this modern classic, a Japanese writer. This is another one that doesn't have the translator. This is definitely a translated work. I will try to figure out who the translator is. I will revisit it as I read more Japanese classics. Another collection of poetry is Selected Poems by William Carlos Williams. William Carlos Williams wrote my favorite ever poem, and I was happy to read more of his work. I have not read a lot of his poetry. I also have a book of essays by him. William Carlos Williams was a doctor in New Jersey with Hispanic roots, and it definitely shows in his poetry that he was from New Jersey. It definitely shows that he was a doctor. He talks a lot about death. He talks a lot about his environment, where he is at the time, and I really enjoyed this. Not a ton of the poems stuck with me, but some around New Jersey definitely did, so this is one I would keep and revisit. I read The Cat, the Quilt, and the Corpse for the Cat Cozy Mystery series that I put out, and this is a Cats in Trouble mystery by Leanne Sweeney. I would not normally keep this book on my shelves, but I do keep all my Cat Cozy mysteries for that project, so I will be keeping this, and I'm actually going to put it with all the other Cat Cozy mysteries right up here. When I deem it an appropriate time in that project, I will be getting rid of a lot of those books. The next book is also a cozy mystery. It is Death by a Dumpling by Vivian Chen. This is a noodle shop mystery. It's the first in the series. This takes place in a Chinatown area of Cleveland, Ohio, and our main character has moved back in with her parents. Her life has imploded, and she's back working at her parents' noodle shop. Pretty typical cozy mystery. I did really like this one, and I definitely will be continuing on with this series. I love this cover. I think it's so great, but I will not be keeping this book. I don't need to keep these physically. I read them on audio to begin with, so I will be getting rid of this one, and hopefully someone enjoys it as much as I do. Next we have The Diving Bell and the Butterfly by Jean-Dominique Bauby. This is a translated nonfiction. This was translated from the French by Jeremy Leggett. This is a journal or a diary of Bauby's time being in hospital with locked-in syndrome. So he is, by all accounts and purposes, completely unresponsive. The only way that he can communicate with the outside world is by blinking one eye. This was a really fascinating read, and I will definitely be rereading it. I will definitely be referencing it again. I read Spy Family 1 almost all in one sitting in Arizona when I visited earlier in the year. This is a really renowned manga series that people love. I did enjoy it. I will be continuing on with the series. I will be keeping this manga for now. I don't know if it's necessarily one that I would go back to once I'm finished with the series, but while I'm reading it, I'd like to be able to reference it. I actually read Queen of the Damned on audio because I didn't have a physical copy, so I found this movie tie-in copy later in the year after I had already already read it and decided to pick it up. I did read Queen of the Damned as well as The Vampire Lestat. I should probably pull that one too. The Vampire Lestat, you can tell, this is my original copy that I've read many times since my teenage years, since my young adult years, and I reread The Vampire Lestat. I thought I had also read Queen of the Damned, and I may have, but I really didn't remember this one that much. I read Interview with the Vampire last year or the year before, reread, because I've read that one many times as well. That one is still my favorite, but Queen of the Damned might be my second favorite in the series so far. I don't usually like movie tie-ins, but I'm glad to have this movie tie-in cover because I did love this movie as well. I'll be keeping both of these. Another fantastic memoir that I read this year was Stay True by Hua Su. This is his story of meeting his best friend, how that best friend changed his life, his outlook on life, his perspective on life, but also his perspective on himself and his own inner thoughts of himself, and then what Hua Su goes through when he loses this best friend. I will keep this memoir because I could definitely see myself revisiting it. Another diary and another inspirational book for me this year was Japan in the Passing Lane by Satoshi Kamata. This has an introduction by Ronald Dodor and is translated from the Japanese by Tetsuru Akimoto. This is an insider's account of the life of a Japanese auto factory. So this takes place in the 70s, I think, and it is all about Kamata's time being a seasonal worker in the Toyota factory. I thought this was really interesting. I definitely will be keeping this one and revisiting it. Try to turn on some lights, had to pause and have dinner. The Uncommon Reader by Alan Bennett is a short book about the Queen of England discovering reading or rediscovering reading. This one was fine. It was fun. It's a love letter to readers. I will be unhauling this. Madonna in a Fur Coat by Sabahat Ali is a translated work. This was translated by Maureen Freeman and Alexander Daw, and this is another story within a storybook within a book about some journals that someone is reading of the kind of love of their life. I thought it was okay. I thought it was interesting, but I don't think I need to keep it. I think if I were going to revisit it, I would do so on audio. What Feasts at Night is the second of the Sworn Soldier series by T. Kingfisher. I read What Moves the Dead earlier in the year as well. I love this series. Definitely keeping this one on my shelves. Another Yasunari Kawabata that I read this year is The Dancing Girl of Isu and Other Stories. This is a collection of short stories translated by J. Martin Holman. And like I said, I'm going to keep all of the Yasunari Kawabata. I do really enjoy him as a writer. Double Blind by Edward St. Aubin is about two friends who kind of reconnect and the relationship that they form. I like this one. I love this cover. I think it's absolutely beautiful, but I don't really remember it that well. I remember enjoying it, but I don't really remember much about it. I don't think it's one that I necessarily want to revisit, so I will be unhauling this one. I've had Silk by Alessandro Barrica on my TBR for a really long time. I picked this one up at a used bookstore book sale. This was translated from the Italian by Guido Waldman. I wasn't sure if I was going to like it, but I actually really enjoyed this book. It reminded me a lot of Italio Calvino writing. Murder Past Due is another cat cozy mystery. This is by Miranda James, and this is the first in the Cat in the Stacks mystery. This is about a man and his Maine Coon cat. I will be keeping it on my shelves, but in the long run, I will probably just read these on audio. I don't need to be picking them up. I am, like I said, going to keep this one for those videos, but eventually I will get rid of it. Owls in the Family by Fairly Mowat is a middle grade book. I love Fairly Mowat. This story wasn't my favorite, but I am going to keep this because I love Fairly Mowat. Here is New York. It's a little essay about New York by E.B. White. I didn't realize that this was part of a larger collection or there were more books like this. I really enjoyed this story, and so I'm definitely going to seek out his other New York stories. And I'm going to keep this one. Ghost Month by Ed Lin is the start of a mystery series. I've read one other book by Ed Lin, which I loved, which was also the start of a series. This one follows Jingnan, or Gianni, as he returns to Taipei. For now, I'm going to keep them on my shelves. A series that I love, and I am definitely keeping on my shelves, is the Mrs. Polifax series by Dorothy Gilman. I read at least 3 books this year. I don't know if we'll find another book in this series that I read, but I read The Unexpected Mrs. Polifax, which is number 1, The Elusive Mrs. Polifax, and The Amazing Mrs. Polifax, so 1, 2, and 3. And these follow Mrs. Polifax, who is a widower from New Jersey. and she decides to join the CIA. There's always something more to these stories, and I love the way that's woven in. We'll be keeping these. The Master Key by Masako Tagawa is a Japanese modern classic. It was translated from the Japanese by Simon Grove. Tagawa was a really interesting person in Japan. She was queer, and this is all about a mystery that's happening in, or several mysteries really, that is happening in a apartment building in Japan. So I will be keeping this one. Next is Frankenstein by Jeanette Winterson. I've never read a Jeanette Winterson before, but this was an interesting queer trans take on Frankenstein. I think Frankenstein retellings are really interesting. This one was not my favorite. I do love that it had trans representation. I did think it was a really interesting book, but it's not one that I need to keep. Another book that I don't need to keep, but that I really enjoyed, was Several People Are Typing by Calvin Kosulke. This is a book told entirely in Slack messages. I hate when people say things are a weird book, but this is a little bit of a weird book. Sometimes they felt weird for the sake of being weird, but it was a super fun reading experience, and I did really enjoy it. I do believe that this is also a trans author, so I would love to read more of their work, but I'm gonna let this one go and let someone else experience it. It was super fun though. Jeff Vandermeer's Born is the start of a series. I've read all of the Southern Reach trilogy, which is actually 4 books now, and I absolutely love them. And I really loved Born too, so I do want to read the other books in the series. I think there's 1 novella and 1 other novel. This book, I think about it a lot actually. I would love to reread it, and I will definitely be keeping it. I probably will keep pretty much anything I ever read by Jeff Vandermeer because I loved the Southern Reach trilogy so much. Offshore by Penelope Fitzgerald is the second Penelope Fitzgerald I read. I read both of them this year. I did really like this one. Her books are so cinematic. They just make you think that they should be a play or a movie. And this is about a group of people kind of living on the fringes, both literally and figuratively. They live on houseboats at a dock, and it's all about the different people who live there and the relationships that they form. This is a tough one because I did really enjoy this. She is a winner of the Booker Prize, so it fit into my Booker Prize project. But I read this one on audio, and I don't see myself revisiting it physically. I also read her other book on audio, and I think I really enjoy her works on audio. So I think this is going to go in the maybe pile, but leaning towards unhauling. Next we have Death Takes Me by Christina Rivera Garza. This is translated by Sarah Booker and Robin Mayers. I believe it was translated from the Spanish because Garza, I think, is an Argentinian author. This is a really weirdly put together book, very experimental, has kind of a poetic cadence to it, is told in weird ways, sometimes is talk direct to reader, sometimes is self-insert by the author. Very, very weird, sort of kind of mystery book. I really enjoyed this. Let me put it in the maybe pile and then decide. I read The Lady's Guide to Celestial Mechanics by Olivia Waite. This is the first Olivia Waite that I've read, and this is a queer, sapphic Regency romance. This is another one that I read on audio, and I feel like I should keep just because I liked it so much, but will I ever reread this one physically? Let me put it in the maybe pile. Middle Game by Shauna McGuire. This has been on my TBR for a long time. I bought this used copy from a used online bookstore. I read this one on audio. It took me a really long time to get to because it is so long, because it is YA, but I love Shauna McGuire so much, as I mentioned before, that I really did want to read it. I'm surprised at how much I enjoyed it. I'm surprised that I think about it. I definitely want to reread this one. I might want to reread this one physically because I did read it on audio the first time. It does have time jumps in it, and it does have like reoccurring themes in it that probably come up in a physical nature. So I think I'm going to keep this one, keep it on my shelves, and definitely try to reread it at some point soon. And I do want to continue on with the series. Gil's All-Fright Diner by A. Lee Martinez is one of those books that I just picked up totally randomly at a used book sale, and I ended up really enjoying. I thought this was a series, but actually the author, A. Lee Martinez, commented on one of my videos shows that it's not. It definitely could be, though. It's so much fun. So I do want to keep my eye out for more of their work. This is about Earl, who is the Earl of Vampires, and Duke, who is the Duke of Werewolves. It's about their friendship and them traveling across the country. Really, really fun, really good, a little bit dated, but super enjoyable. I think I will keep this on my shelves for now. Small Things Like These is the second Claire Keegan that I've read. I also read Foster. I love these small editions. They're so adorable. Most people know what this is about because it was made into a movie in the beginning of 2025, and this is another Booker book, so it's pretty well known. It is about a man who delivers coal and fuel and firewood to various places in Northern Ireland and a decision that he has to make. It's really good. It's not as gruesome and graphic and horrible as one might think, or as I thought, so I'm happy to keep it on my shelves. I really enjoyed Vera Wong's Unsolicited Advice for Murderers by Jessie Q. Sutanto. I thought this was such a fun, cozy mystery, very silly. Loved the found family, enjoyed the mystery itself, even though it was pretty obvious. I did love my experience reading this. I read it on audio, so I think I would continue to read these on audio, and I think I will pass this one along so that someone else can get as much enjoyment out of the story as I did. Next we have Wolf in a White Man by John Darnielle. This was such an interesting book about a man who creates a role-playing game, but it's like a write-in role-playing game, so you have to write your next move and send it into the creator of the game, and then he sends you back what happens. So fascinating. I've read one of their John Darnielle, and I have another one of his. I'm definitely going to keep this one. I want to reread it at some point. It's interesting. It's not for everyone, but it was for me. I picked up From Here to the Great Unknown by Lisa Marie Presley and Riley Coe in a little free library. I had no intention of reading this originally, but I am an Elvis fan, and my brother very much was an Elvis fan, and this is his daughter Lisa Marie's memoir that she started before she passed away. It was finished posthumously by her daughter, Riley Coe, and it wasn't a very good memoir. It was a little rose-tinted for sure. I don't feel like it was completely honest. I don't feel like it was completely genuine in a lot of moments, but it did make me cry. I thought it was fine. It was super fast to get through. I just don't think it was very well written on either author's part. I know it's someone's actual life, so maybe that doesn't really matter, but I'm definitely not keeping this one. I think what I will do is see if my brother wants to read it. When the Reckoning Comes is a story by LaTanya McQueen about a young woman who's returning to her southern hometown for a wedding of her high school best friend. She's not expecting to go back there. She's not expecting that they're still friends, and she's even more surprised when the wedding is taking place at a remodeled plantation and you can tour the slave quarters. This is horror. This is a social horror. This is a ghost story. This is a story about people's pasts and when that comes back to haunt them. And I was highly, highly, highly anticipating this one for a long time. In between that time, I've read other stories like it, and although I thought this was good, I did think that other books that I've read have done it better. I think it's a great place to start if you're looking for that kind of book. So I'm going to pass this one on so someone else can get something out of it. The Crazy Kill by Chester Himes is part of the Harlem Cycle series, which all takes place in Harlem and mostly revolves around two cops. Even though the two cops are sometimes the main characters or in it a lot, and we see some things through their perspective, mostly this series, from what I can tell, follows various groups of people and different things that occur in Harlem. I love these books. The first one is Rage in Harlem. I thought it was fantastic. I really enjoyed this one. I do think about this one a lot as well. I'm definitely keeping it. Sula by Toni Morrison was a reread for me. This is the first Toni Morrison I read, and then I read it again because I'm reading them in publication order. This is a very beat up copy. I keep seeing another copy I should just pick up, but I do love this copy. Super happy to have reread it, and I will be keeping it. Black Flame by Gretchen Felker Martin is a haunted film story. I have not read many of those, so I was super excited to read this one, but I thought this book was pretty bad. It had some interesting ideas. I would definitely read more from this author, but I didn't really like this book, so I'm gonna pass it along. Sleepless Nights by Elizabeth Hardwick is another NYRB book. This is kind of a stream of consciousness, auto-fiction about a woman who can't sleep, and so she thinks about her life and thinks about all the different encounters that she's had. I didn't love this one, but I think it's definitely worth revisiting, and I would like to read more by this author, so I will keep this. Here's the other version of Cain. Love this cover as well. I think I like this cover more than the other cover, so maybe I'll keep this one and get rid of that one. The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison is her first in publication order. It kind of shows as a debut novel. I did really enjoy it, but it's a little bit harder to understand and also to get in the flow of. I'm glad that I did not read this one first. I'm glad that I read Sula first and then this one. That being said, I think this was fantastic, as all of the Toni Morrisons that I've read are, and I will definitely be keeping this one. The Dead Take the A Train by Cassandra Khaw and Richard Kadrey is a super fun demon hunting, bounty hunter, cosmic horror book about a bounty hunter and her friend who comes back into her life who she's always had a crush on. I enjoyed this one a lot. I'm really hoping that these authors are going to continue on with this series because I would love to see what happens next. I'm definitely going to keep this one. Decline and Fall by Evelyn Waugh is the third Evelyn Waugh I've read, I think. And this is about a man who is kind of just carried along by life, and it's about his decline and fall. I will be keeping this one. When We Were Birds is a Caribbean story about a young man who has to travel to another island to find work, and his mother is really worried about this. She really doesn't want him to. And when he gets there, he kind of finds out why. He ends up working at a cemetery, and it turns out that he has a deeper connection to this cemetery than he thought. At the same time, we're learning about a woman whose mother has just passed and her connection with this cemetery. I really, really like this one. I read it on audio. Did I mention this is by Ayanna Lloyd Bonwo? There is another cover to this book that I like a lot better, so if I ever found that other cover, I think I would swap them out, but for now I'll keep this one. Binti was a reread for me. I read Binti and the second in the series this year by Nnedi Okorafor. This is a Afrofuturism sci-fi story of a young woman who's the first of her village to go off to International Space University, which sounds fun, but this is not a fun book. This is an action-packed book, but it has a lot of horrific things in it, and it does have a lot of violence and death, but I really, really love this series, and I hope to finish it in 2026. Definitely keeping this one, and keeping my eye out for the other in the series. Symptoms of Belonging by Salman Akhtar is a collection of poetry. I really liked some of the poetry in this. There's some longer prose poetry that were my favorites of this collection. It deals with themes of Zionism and being a person of color, being a brown person in society, and also having Muslim roots. It deals with being torn between multiple cultures. This is one that I would like to revisit. Blackouts by Justin Torres I read so long ago. I almost forgot that I read this in 2025. It's a really interesting book that has photos in it, and it does actually have blacked out text in it as well. Blackouts is about a young man who's staying with his older friend who's dying, and it's talking about their time in a mental institute, and the blackout elements are basically medical notebooks that have been redacted. It was very interesting. It was very experimental. It was very bizarre. There's a short story by Justin Torres that I read. I can't remember what it was called. It contained the initial elements, I believe, for this book, and it was much more linear and it was much more straightforward. So if you want to dip a toe into Justin Torres's work and into this book, I would read that short story first and then read this. I did really like this. I definitely will be keeping it. The Devil in the Dark Water was another reread for me. This is by Stuart Turton, and this is a historical fiction about sort of Sherlock Holmes type detective who is taken prisoner and taken on a boat to return and await trial back in Amsterdam. He has a sidekick, not exactly a Watson, because the sidekick does have a lot to offer, not that Watson doesn't, but who ends up having to solve the mystery that occurs on the ship because the Sherlock character is locked up in the brig. I'm keeping this one. It's a reread. Trespasses by Louise Kennedy is a novel about a young woman who's kind of at loose ends. She is in Northern Ireland and she meets a man and falls in love. They have an affair, but they are on opposite sides of the conflict, and it's all about her having to navigate like other people's feelings about this affair, and it talks a lot about the Troubles and Ireland at that time and what it would be like to live at that time. I didn't think I was going to like this, but I actually really did. I don't think I need to keep it on my shelves. I read it on audio. I did really enjoy it, but if I was going to revisit it, I would revisit it on audio. If my father has not read this, I think I'm going to give it to him. If You Kept a Record of Sins by Andrea Bajani or Bajani is a translated work. It was translated from the Italian by Elizabeth Harris. This is one of these amazing tiny little editions that I do love so much. Archipelago Press is the name of these books. This is about a young man looking back on his life and his relationship with his mother. I did not think I was going to like this, but I ended up really liking it, and I think about it a lot. I'm going to keep this one. The Dinner by Herman Koch is another translated book. This was translated from the Dutch by Sam Garrett. This follows a man and a woman going to dinner with their friends, and through that dinner we learn about their connection, the connection of the main couple and the main man that we're in the head of throughout this book to his, I think it's his brother actually, and why they're having this dinner. We also learn all about the man's relationship to his son and the inner workings of this man's mind. I think this was a really well written book, a good book. It did what it set out to do, but I hated it, and I hated reading it, hated being inside this man's head. And you're supposed to, going back to that unlikable character idea where this is an unlikable character and you don't root for him or anything, but you can see his point of view. It's not just unlikable for the sake of unliking. I don't want to keep this book though. I don't want to read it again. I wish I didn't think about it that much. It did what it was supposed to do. It is a very good book, but I don't want it. Everyone on This Train is a Suspect by Benjamin Stevenson is the second in the Ernest Cunningham series. I really like this series about a reluctant mystery author and amateur detective who loves mystery novels but doesn't expect to find himself in one, so I will be keeping this. How to Live Safely in a Sci-Fi Universe by Charles Yu is another weird kind of experimental book. I did read this one on audio and I did like it. This is another one that might benefit from reading it again physically. I really love Charles Yu's other book, Interior Chinatown. I have that one on my shelves, and that makes me think I want to keep this one along with the potential to reread it physically, but I don't think I'm going to. I'll put it in the baby pile. Earth Eater is another translated work. This is by Dolores Reyes and translated from the Spanish by Julia Sanchez. This is about a young woman who realizes that if she eats earth, she can learn people's stories. It's about her childhood. It's about losing her mother, and it's about what she does with this power that she discovers. I really did enjoy this. I read this one on audio. I really do like this cover a lot. But again, I feel like I've read books with these themes that I enjoyed more, or at least equally. This one didn't blow me away, although I did really like it. I think if I want to revisit this, I will revisit it on audio, so I can give this to a little free library and let someone else enjoy it as well. Barracoon by Zora Neale Hurston is a nonfiction book about the last man who was still alive at the time of writing this book, who came over on a slave trading ship. It's really interesting. It's self-inserted by the author because she talks about her experience researching this nonfiction story and talking to this man. I definitely want to keep it on my shelves. I did read this one on audio, so maybe next time I read it, I will read it physically, but some of it is told in dialect, so I think a really approachable way to read Zora Neale Hurston is on audio. Last Seen Alive by Dorothy Simpson is a Luke Thanet mystery. This is one of the British cozy mystery authors that I really enjoy, and I keep all of their books. This is part of a series. It's kind of in the beginning, middle part. It follows Inspector Thanet as he solves crimes around the English countryside in small English villages. I really love this series, and I love this edition. It's so great. The Argonauts by Maggie Nelson is a nonfiction memoir about about gender, love, writing, reading, authors, pregnancy, and meeting her partner and being with her partner. It was really interesting. I read this one in audio. I definitely want to keep this one and reread it physically because there are a lot of quotes in it and a lot of asides, and I think it would be good to reread it physically. This reminded me a lot of My Year Without a Name by Cyrus Grace Dunham. I think these two books talk to each other, and one day I hope to read them together. Another collection of poetry is Rocket Fantastic by Gabrielle Calvo Caresi. So I loved the last time I saw Amelia Earhart, and I decided to pick that one up because like I said, I read it at my friend's house, and at the same time I picked this one up used online. This one didn't work as well for me, but I still really liked it, and I look forward to reading more. We'll be keeping that one. The only one left by Riley Sager. I don't know why I read Riley Sager books. This is about a carer taking care of a Lucy Borden type character in a remote mansion in Maine, and we get to learn the story. There's usually two timelines in Riley Sager's books. There's usually flawed characters. This one was okay. I think when I first read it, I was really angry about it and I really didn't like it, but I've mellowed over time and I think it was just fine. I'm pretty sure that after I read this, I said I wasn't going to read any more Riley Sagers. I'm definitely not going to seek them out, but if I happen upon them, I probably will read them. They're super quick, super easy reads. I think I'm always chasing the aspects of the one of his that I really did enjoy, so I will keep reading them to see if any other books ever have those aspects. If my friend Michael hadn't read this one already, I would give it to him, but he has, so I will leave this in a little free library. Another mystery book that I really didn't like was A Flicker in the Dark by Stacey Willingham. This is about a young woman who returns to her hometown, or maybe she already lives there, but there's something in her past and something to do with her family and a serial killer and blah blah blah. It's very boring, and you've heard it all before and you've read it all before, and I didn't think it was doing anything really good, and I didn't like the main character, so I will definitely be passing this along. I will give this to my friend Michael if he hasn't read it. The Complete Collected Poems of Maya Angelou is a really big collection of poetry, and it contains most of her poems, all the poems up to the point that this book was published, and it contains them in the books that they were originally in, so each section is a book. So some of these collections I have read before, and then I reread in this big collection. I really liked the way that was done in this book. I will be keeping this one, of course. I'm currently reading a huge collection of Langston Hughes poems, and they're not collected like that, and I kind of wish they were. This one, if you're interested in reading Maya Angelou's poetry, is obviously a good one to get because it's everything, but I think that I like reading small collections better than big ones. Lady Takes the Case and Lady Rights the Wrong by Eliza Casey are kind of cat cozy mysteries. I did read the first one for the Cat Cozy Mystery series. The cat isn't super prominent in them. I don't think I need to keep these. They're about Lady Cecilia, who is an aristocrat in England around the late 1800s, early 1900s. In the first book, an American comes to visit the house of Lady Cecilia and brings along her maid, who is an American from New York, and Lady Cecilia and the maid become fast friends. And Jack, the little orange tabby cat who was found on the ship over from America, tags along with the maid. They all become fast friends and they all work to solve different mysteries. I don't even remember really the mysteries in some of these. I guess they both had murders. I like that Lady Cecilia and her friend are growing up in these books, and I did enjoy the series. They're just not like super memorable to me. I think I will keep these for my Cat Cozy Mystery series, but then I will definitely pass them along. I do hope that Eliza Casey writes more in this series. I would read them, but I think I would just read them on audio and not pick up the physical books. Bless the Daughter, Raised by a Voice in Her Head by Warshawn Sire was an interesting collection of poems, had a lot to do with womanhood and motherhood and familiar relationships, specifically mother-daughter relationships. Not the kind of thing that I usually love to read about, but I did enjoy a lot of the poems in this. I liked the mix of contemporary themes and contemporary references with more universal themes and everlasting themes. Reminded me a little bit of my favorite poet, Nika Giovanni. It wasn't as engaging to me as that, but I will definitely be keeping this one and rereading it. Another gay modern classic, another queer modern classic that I read this year that surprised me was A Single Man by Christopher Isherwood. It is a classic for a reason. It is about a single man, a man who has lost his partner, and it is all one day in this man's life, and we get to see what his job as a professor is like, what his feelings on being queer is like, what his feelings on loss and love are like, just everything in between, and it was really great. You don't necessarily love this main character. He's not necessarily a very likable character, but his story is very relatable and universal. It was a great book. It's definitely a little bit heartbreaking, but it's a classic for a reason, and I really did love it, and I will be keeping it. Brain on Fire by Susanna Callahan is a nonfiction memoir of the time that Susanna suffered a brain sickness that made her feel like she was going insane and made people think she was insane. And it's a very interesting memoir. I liked that Susanna did talk about privilege and about class discrepancy a little bit in this, mostly towards the end, but it was a fascinating read. It would be good to read for people who like The Diving Bell and the Butterfly, for people who like The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat, and other works of medical nonfiction memoir, which also means that it's pretty gruesome, it's pretty devastating, it's pretty sad, it's pretty gross. I did really enjoy my time with it, but I definitely don't need to keep it. I read When No One Can Know by Kate Ellis Marshall, and I always get it confused with Stacey Willingham. I read 2 Kate Ellis Marshalls this year, and I liked both of them. This one I think I liked less. The other one was something about the woods. This is about, I don't know, a woman returning to her hometown and something to do with serial killer, and maybe her family's involved, and blah 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 blah. I don't remember anything about it really. I just remembered that I enjoyed it. I will be giving this one to my friend Michael. I will definitely read more Kate Ellis Marshall. I'm a little bit interested to read her young adult novels because I think her young adult thriller horror novels might be really fun. Another reread for me was The Fire Next Time by James Baldwin. This is an essay about the state of the world in the 60s and the state of race relations. It's about love, it's about understanding, it's about acceptance. It's wonderful. I will always reread it. I've reread it 3 times now. I love it. I love it. I love it. I will be keeping it. Friday Black by Nana Kwame Adjei-Barenya is the first book that I've read by this author, but I do also have his novel Chain Gang All-Stars. I really love this collection of short stories that has a lot to do with retail. These are definitely horror leaning, definitely social horror leaning, definitely have some themes that you probably have read before if you're interested in any of those buzzwords. Social horror, horror, the Black experience, retail, all of that stuff, but I really like these stories and I will be keeping this collection. Song of Solomon by Toni Morrison is the 3rd Toni Morrison in publication order. I think about this one a lot. It is about a young man who grows up being very sure of himself, being a golden child, but being Black in America. He decides that he wants to learn more about the past and about his past, and he goes on an adventure. It's also about his relationship with his best friend, who is just like a brother to him, and that relationship I think is what stuck with me the most. I really love this one. I will keep all Toni Morrison. Winter in Sokcho by Eliza Schwa-Dusepen is a translated book. This was translated by Anissa Abbas Higgins from the German, I believe. This author is German and Korean, or maybe Japanese, German and Korean. But this is about a hotel in Korea, in Sokcho, and about the young woman who's working there. Her life is at a little bit of a dead end. In some ways she minds this, in some ways she doesn't. This is a very bleak story, but I loved it. I don't know, I loved the atmosphere, I loved the bleakness of it, I liked the characters. I can't wait to read more by this author. Definitely will be keeping this one. The Colony by Audrey McGee is a Booker book, and this is about an artist who goes to a remote Northern Ireland island to paint. This island is pretty much untouched by a lot of things, and it's almost untouched by the Troubles, except that they hear a lot about them on the radio. And so we see this artist and the upheaval that he causes on this island, and we see the family dynamics of the people who live on this island and how that's changed by this man. And then another man comes to the island, and that changes things even more. And then we have the encroaching Troubles and the world kind of closing in on this island and what that's going to mean for the people there. I really like this this one. I thought it was really good. I like the way it was written. I could definitely see myself rereading this, but I think I would reread it on audio. Did I read this one physically or did I read it on audio? I honestly can't remember. I don't think I need to keep this though. It's not one that I think I need the physical copy of. The Library at Hellbore was the other book that I was thinking of by Cassandra Caw. I kind of wish that I talked to about this one at the same time as The Dead Take the A Train. This is another horror book. This has a lot of body horror in it. This has a lot of dark academia vibes. It's about a school that you are kind of forced to go to if you have magical powers, whether you're going to survive this school or not. I thought this one was interesting. I really like Cassandra Caw's writing. You could see some of the same writing aspects that were in The Dead Take the A Train, but this story just didn't grab me as much as that one, and I didn't like it as much. This is an absolutely stunning cover though, but I don't need to keep this one on my shelves. I think this is a standalone. If this is a series, I will probably read more in the series. It wasn't my favorite, even though I enjoyed it, so I will pass this one along. Night of the Living Rez is not a horror collection of short stories. This is by Morgan Atalti, and this is actually just indigenous stories about a man living in Maine. It's about multiple people, but it really is kind of a back and forth of him as a young child and him as an older man and the different stories of his life. It's not exactly a novel of interconnected short stories, but it is a collection of interconnected short stories. I really did like some of it, and other parts of it I don't really remember. I do think I'm going to keep this one. It's so hard for me not to think that this is horror though. I think it's a really bad name because it makes you think it's going to be horror. There are real horrors in it. There is real life horror, but it's not a horror story. So I always want to like beat people over the head with that. I will be keeping this one. The Man in Lower 10, another Mary Roberts Reinhardt that I read this year. I loved this one. It was so exciting. It was so thrilling. There was a train wreck. There was all this stuff that happened, and I thought this one was really great. Black and Buddhist, What Buddhism Can Teach Us About Race, Resilience, Transformation, and Freedom, which is edited by Pamela Ayu Yatunde and Cheryl A. Giles. They also have stories in this collection of essays. They kind of bookend this collection. The interconnected threads of this collection being Black and Buddhist. I think this is a really interesting book to read about Buddhism, but also about the Black experience, and I really enjoyed reading it. There were so many aspects of this that did resonate with me, especially in the early essays, so I will be keeping this one. The Legacy of Lost Things by Ada Leon was not a very good book. This is a pretty cover, and I've had this one for a little while. It's about a daughter of a Armenian American family who runs away, and you see all the different people in this family, her sister, her mother, her father, and you read from her as well about what led up to this runaway, about their lives, about their relationships. It sounds interesting, but it really just was poorly written and mostly forgettable. So I won't be keeping this one. Whiteout by Greg Rucka and Steve Lieber is a queer mystery horror graphic novel about a woman who is kind of exiled to police, I think Antarctica, somewhere very, very, very cold. And it's about how a murder occurs there and she starts to investigate. It's about her life and the relationships that she forms and why she's kind of been given this really terrible job to do. I will be keeping this one. There's one more in the series which I would like to find and read. I'll put it on my graphic novel shelf. Children's book that I read this year is Lemonade Serenade, The Thing in the Garden by Dawn Madden. This has great pictures, and I do remember some of these pictures from when I was a kid, so I must have read this at some point. It's about a thing in the garden and the people who discover it. It was okay. It's mostly just very beautiful, so I will be keeping it, but I will not be keeping it with my favorite children's stories. I'll just be keeping it with other children's stories. She's Always Hungry is a collection of horror short stories. Reminds me of Friday Black and of Her Body and Other Parties, which I read last year. This one's by Eliza Clark. There's a couple of short stories in here that I didn't love, and then there were a couple that I really loved, so I will be keeping this one. The one that I liked the best was about a mysterious restaurant and all its Yelp reviews. Spring Garden by Tomoko Shibasaki was translated from the Japanese by Polly Barton. I bought this book new this year from a Asian market up in northern New Jersey, and I really love this. It's about two people, mostly told from the young man's perspective, who live in a rundown apartment building. I also really liked When We Cease to Understand the World. This is by Benjamin Labatut or Labatut, and it was translated from the Spanish by Adrian Nathan West. This is like a retelling, reimagining of various scientists' lives. It sounds so boring and so dry, and in a way it is, but it was also so weirdly comforting. I can't really explain the plot because there wasn't really a plot, but I loved it, and I will be keeping it. Spread Me by Sarah Gailey is also about scientists. This is a very strange future cli-fi novel about a group of scientists who are living in a desert and researching that desert, learning more about it for a large corporation that wants to like terraform it. And it's about the leader of this group who brings in a specimen when she knows she should not. Again, I don't like to use the term weird, but this one was a little weird. It's very sexual. It's got a lot of body horror. It's got a lot of really sad parts. In this very short book, Sarah Gailey makes you really feel for these characters, and so when things start going wrong at this research facility, you are sad about it. But I really, really enjoyed it. I love Sarah Gailey's work, so I will keep Sarah Gailey books whenever I have them. Going Out with Peacocks is a poetry collection by Ursula K. Le Guin, the famous sci-fi author. This one was really interesting. I didn't love all the poems in here, but like Nikki Giovanni, it had contemporary themes and contemporary events that happened throughout the poetry, which I really liked. And I definitely would love to read more works by Ursula K. Le Guin in general, but certainly more of her poetry. The Catcher Was a Spy, The Mysterious Life of Mo Berg by Nicholas Dawidoff is a nonfiction about Mo Berg, who was a catcher and a spy. He was a catcher for Major League Baseball. I read this for opening day, although I didn't finish it in time. I read a baseball book, at least one, every year. This was the one I chose in 2025. I didn't love this. I thought the story was really interesting. I didn't love the way that it was organized. There are some facts that will definitely stay with me. I wouldn't keep this, except we have a baseball shelf, so I will keep it on our baseball shelf. Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf is the first Virginia Woolf that I've read. This is a very famous stream of consciousness novel set all in one day about Mrs. Dalloway having a party, and she's walking out of her house to get the flowers. Then you hear about everything she's ever done and everyone she's ever met and everything that she's ever seen through a stream of consciousness. It was interesting. I liked it, I think. I definitely need to reread it. I think this cover is hideous, so I don't think I'm going to keep this copy. I read this one on audio, and I think audio was a good way to go because I don't think I could have gotten through this otherwise. Claire DeWitt and the Bohemian Highway is the second in the Claire DeWitt books, so I'll talk about The Infinite Blacktop at the same time because I reread this entire series. I read the first one last year maybe or the year before, and then I reread these two in 2025 because I found a physical copy of this one. I love this series. It's about Claire DeWitt, who is a holistic detective. She travels all around. She's mostly in California and in New Orleans. These books were written for me. I love them so much. Excellent Women is the first Barbara Pym that I read. This is about one specific excellent woman, a woman who is childless, a woman who is older, a woman who has outlived her usefulness, but they are still good at like comforting people and making tea cakes. It's a comedy of manners. It's satirical look at British society at this time. I really enjoyed this one. I can't wait to read more Barbara Pym. The Sense of an Ending by Julian Barnes is the first Julian Barnes I read. This reminds me a little of A Single Man in that it's like the story of this guy's life. It's not told all in one day, certainly. He's not like a wholly likable character, but he is a relatable character in many ways. I think unfortunately this one didn't work for me because this character was pretty irredeemable. He was not trying to learn from his mistakes. So I don't think I want to keep this one. I think it was a good book. I think it was well written. I think it was interesting. I think that I could revisit it, but I would revisit it on audio, but I don't want it. Here's What Moves the Dead, which we already talked about. Loved it. Cover is gorgeous. I read Crackpot, The Obsessions by John Waters. This is a non-fiction collection of essays by famous filmmaker and artist and commenter John Waters, queer man John Waters. This is a collection of his obsessions. Some of this was funny, some of this was tedious. The most interesting essay to me was his essay about doing classes in a prison, which I guess he actually really did, like going to prison and doing film classes. That was really fascinating. Mostly I found this to be like extremely tedious. I don't think I need to keep this one. but maybe I'll see if somebody I know wants it. The Legacy of Molly Southbourne is the third in the Molly Southbourne trilogy. I reread the first one and then read the second two this year. I love this trilogy. I lent my copy out of the first book. I never had the second book, so I need to re-find those two and keep these on my shelves. It's about Molly Southbourne, who is in a very unique situation in the first book, and her parents are teaching her how to live a certain kind of life, and it's what happens when she has to go out on her own, basically. Perfume, the story of a murderer, by Patrick Susskind, is a translated work. This was translated from the German by John E. Woods. This is a modern classic horror novel about a man who has no physical smell about his birth and about his life, but he can smell really well. So he becomes a perfumer and a murderer. I thought this was really weird, not in like a weird book way, just it was very different than what I expected. It was much more satirical, much more tongue-in-cheek, much more silly than I thought, but it didn't really work for me and I didn't really love it. The thing that I did like was that it went off on side tangents about different people. I think Earth Eater did that, and some other books that I read this year did that as well. So that part was really interesting, but I'm gonna pass this one along. The Lottery and Other Stories I've been reading for like 3 years. It's a huge collection of Shirley Jackson's short stories. I really love Shirley Jackson. I will definitely be keeping this copy. Some of these stories have really stuck with me. Some of them have not. I will probably dip in and out and revisit them. It was just a lot to read all at once. I love The Haunting of Hill House. We Have Always Lived in the Castle. That book was written for me. I love it so much. I will keep this one. Brooklyn in Love was really bad. It was really badly written, and unlike that medical memoir, this one had no sense of this woman being extremely privileged and her life being extremely privileged. It is a memoir of food, family, and finding yourself, like it says on the cover. And the most interesting thing about it was talking about the different food that she eats and the different restaurants that she goes to and the different experiences she has with food. But overall, it was like a pretty bad book, so I'll be getting rid of it. Stays at the Murakami Bookshop was a cute Japanese work translated by Eric Ozawa. This is one of those stories that's supposed to teach you lessons. This is one of those stories that is supposed to be uplifting. I did really enjoy this. I'm going to hold on to it for now because I do want to read the second in the series, but I don't know if I would keep this forever. The Bookshop is the other Penelope Fitzgerald book that I mentioned reading. I read this one on audio. I really did enjoy it, although this is not a super enjoyable work. Both Offshore and this have a very certain bleakness to them, have a kind of depressing angle to them. This one much more so in many ways, but again, so cinematic, like would make such a great movie. I think this one was made into a movie. I don't think I need to keep this one physically, although I did really like it, but like I said, if I'm going to revisit Penelope Fitzgerald, I might as well do it on audio. Really good book though, I really did like it. And finally, the last book is another book that I read on audio and then got a physical copy of, and it is You Should Be So Lucky by Cat Sebastian. This has got to be one of the only true romances that I read this year, and one of my favorite romances that I read this year. I love this story set in mid-century NYC about a professional baseball player and a reporter who fall in love. So good. It made me want to read much more of Cat Sebastian's work. It made me want to read many more queer romances and queer love stories. I really, really love this one, and what a great way to end this crazy long video. I will be keeping that one, of course. So, those were all the physical books that I read in 2025 that I had on my shelves and what I'm going to do with them. Let me count, figure out how many I'm getting rid of, figure out how many in my maybe pile, figure out how many I'm keeping, and then I don't know where I'm going to put these all. Okay, I have 31 books that I'm unhauling, 6 books that are maybes that might get unhauled, and the rest I'm keeping, which is a lot. I didn't even count them. I'm not going to count them. It's too many to count at the moment. They're taking up my entire desk. A lot of them are poetry. A lot of them are rereads. A lot of them are books that I would be keeping no matter what, like Toni Morrison and Agatha Christie and Mary Roberts Reinhardt. It's a lot of books. Over 100 books, I would say, that I'm keeping. I find that video to be exhausting. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know if you've read any of the books that I mentioned here. Let me know if you think any of the books I should have absolutely kept that I was unhauling, or that I should unhaul that I was keeping. Thanks so much for joining me today, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!